In 1587, some English settlers led by John White established a colony on Roanoke Island off the coast of what became North Carolina. White had returned to England to gather more resources, but due to an ongoing war with Spain, he was delayed for 3 years. When he had finally arrived in 1590, the colony had disappeared without a trace. The only lead was the word Croatoan carved into a rock. Since there were no signs of struggle or battle, and all of the settlers, around 115 men, women, and children, up and vanished, this quickly became one of the most infamous cases of mass disappearance in the history of the United States. Some speculate about possible answers, ranging from assimilation with indigenous tribes, such as the Croatians, to death from starvation, disease, or attack by hostile groups. Some suggest they tried to relocate, but instead had succumbed to the harsh wilderness. Others believe that they fell victim to Spanish forces from Florida. Despite various searches and archaeological investigations, no definitive evidence can explain what happened. The mystery of the lost colony has captured the imagination of historians and researchers for centuries. Some clues have emerged, such as various European artifacts found on indigenous lands, but no definitive answer has ever been found. Roanoke's disappearance remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. It's since inspired countless tales, myths, and investigations, yet the true fate of its people is still unknown. The Mary Celeste was an American merchant ship that was found abandoned in the Atlantic Ocean on December 5, 1872, found by the crew of a British vessel. The Celeste itself was in fine condition. It was even found with an abundance of personal belongings, indicating that the ship's passengers were in a rush to get off. However, its crew, Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, young daughter, and 7 sailors had up and vanished without a trace, leaving behind the perfectly intact and stocked vessel. Though the ship's lifeboat was found missing, but there was no signs of a struggle, violence, or any damage for that matter. The ship's cargo, barrels filled with alcohol, were essentially untouched, and the logbook's last written entry gave no leads or answers whatsoever. The sudden disappearance of the crew present on the Mary Celeste has led to widespread speculation about what could have caused the crew to abandon ship. Some theories propose a sudden storm or waterspout had forced them to evacuate. Other hypotheses include a pirate raid, mutiny, or even some kind of supernatural malevolent force. Some suggest they abandoned ship too soon, fearing it was sinking, only to perish at sea. But since no definitive evidence has been found, this is all simply speculation. Despite various investigations, the fate of the crew remains vague and mysterious. The Mary Celeste itself was salvaged and later used for commercial purposes until it was deliberately wrecked in 1885 in an insurance fraud scheme, leaving this case without a single lead. In December of 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, suddenly vanished without a trace. These men were keepers of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse, located on a remote island just off the coast of Scotland. When the replacing shift of keepers arrived on December 26, they found the lighthouse had been deserted, with no signs of a struggle or distress. The clocks had stopped, the fire had burned out, and the table was set, as if these men had suddenly been faced with an immense threat, one great enough to abandon their posts. An entry in one of the logbooks suggests severe weather in the days leading up to their disappearance, despite reports of calm conditions being widely recorded for that specific date range. The final entry, though, was ominous and only read, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." The investigation revealed that 2 oilskins were missing, meaning 2 of the men had likely gone outside, while the third had stayed behind. The most accepted theory is that a massive and violent wave had swept them away while they were trying to secure some equipment outside. But as no bodies were ever found, it's hard to say for certain. Other theorists suggest foul play, paranormal or supernatural forces, or even psychological breakdowns. Some believe one keeper may have killed the others before taking his own life. However, no evidence support these theories, and the mystery of the missing keepers remains unsolved, leaving the Flannan Isles Lighthouse an enigma in history, with a movie even being made in 2018 titled The Vanishing. In November of 1930, a Canadian fur trapper by the name of Joe LaBelle sought refuge in the Inuit village on the shores of Ongikuni Lake, a place that he had sought refuge in before. However, to his surprise, the village, once bustling with life, was completely abandoned. Lebel found huts with food, clothing, and even rifles left behind. Items no one would leave if they had willingly departed. This mystery deepened when Lebel had discovered no footprints in the snow, no signs of struggle, and no sled dogs. An even more unsettling fact, the village's burial ground had been disturbed, with several graves having been unearthed and now empty. Lebel had reported his findings to the Canadian Mounted Police, who conducted an investigation. They found 7 sled dogs buried under the snow, starved to death, and villagers from nearby areas claimed to have seen a strange blue light in the sky around the time of their disappearance. Despite numerous investigations, no trace of the estimated 2,000 villagers was ever found. Theories range from supernatural explanations, such as alien abduction or spirits, to more likely ideas such as mass migration or a natural disaster. However, the lack of evidence and the eerie details, such as the unearthed graves and blue light, have kept this case shrouded in mystery. Skeptics argue that the story may have been exaggerated or fabricated by Lebel, but personally I believe the Canadian Mounted Police, or more specifically, the Northwestern Mounted Police, had played a role in the disappearance of these Inuit natives, then tried to cover it up in its entirety by claiming it a hoax. Though this is simply speculation, about 40 years prior to the disappearance of Angikuni Lake, the Northwestern Mounted Police had set out on an ill-prepared mission to claim the northwestern region of Canada, with the region at the time being widely uncolonized and considered lawless. Although this event was widely celebrated by the Canadians, as the Northwestern Mounted Police were considered heroic for their bravery, this event is known to have contributed to the displacement and abuse of Canada's Indigenous peoples. Knowing that the Northwestern Mounted Police and Canadian government was so quick to cover up their march west as heroic and brave, I believe they played a role in downplaying this disappearance, even going so far as to claim the whole thing a hoax. The disappearance of the Sauter children on Christmas Eve, December of 1945, remains one of the most confusing unsolved mysteries in American history. George and Jenny Sauter lived in Fayetteville, West Virginia, with their family of 10 children. On the night of Christmas Eve, 1945, a fire had engulfed their family's home. While George, Jenny, and 4 of their children escaped, 5 of them, being Maurice, Martha, Louise, Jenny, and Betty, were never found. Despite an extensive search, no remains were discovered in the rubble, contradicting the expectation that bones should have survived the fire. Firefighters arrived too late to thoroughly investigate, and several oddities and incidents added to the mystery. A severed telephone line, a delayed fire response, and alleged reports of a suspicious figure around the house. Some believe the children had been kidnapped rather than perished in the flames. For decades, the Sauter family had pursued answers. They received reports of sightings and even an anonymous photo of a man claiming to be one of their missing sons. Though they never found any definitive proof, they remained convinced that the children had survived. Numerous theories emerged, including mafia involvement, child trafficking, or an attempt to silence George due to his outspoken criticism of Mussolini, the Italian fascist dictator of Italy at the time. However, no evidence has ever confirmed what happened. In October 1955, the MV Joyita departed from Samoa en route to Tokelau with approximately 25 passengers and crew. However, the boat never arrived. Weeks later, a search party had discovered the ship drifting over 600 miles off course, partially submerged but still afloat. Strangely, all passengers and crew had vanished without a trace. Investigators found unsettling evidence: radios tuned to distress frequencies, damaged piping, missing lifeboats, and blood-stained bandages. However, despite signs of trouble, the ship remained seaworthy, leaving experts baffled as to why it had been abandoned. The engine was malfunctioning, but it wasn't enough to explain a complete evacuation. The onboard cargo, including medicinal supplies and valuable equipment, was also missing. Some suggest the passengers may have perished due to dehydration and exposure after abandoning the vessel. Others speculate foul play, given that no bodies were ever found. While the Joyita was later salvaged, no definitive explanation for the disappearance of those aboard has ever surfaced. During the Gallipoli campaign, British troops, including the 1/5th Battalion of the Norfolk Regiment, were sent to engage Ottoman forces. On August 12th, they advanced into battle near Sova Bay, enduring heavy fire. However, a copious amount of soldiers seemingly vanished without a trace. Reports from eyewitnesses, including soldiers from other units, suggested a supernatural phenomenon. A group of men was seen advancing into a strange mist or cloud, which then lifted, leaving no sign of these troops. Official records reported that over 250 men from the battalion were missing, presumed killed, but their bodies were never recovered. For years, theories ranged from supernatural explanations to the idea that they had been captured or annihilated by Ottoman forces. Decades later, remains believed to belong to some of the missing troops were found, suggesting that they had perished in battle rather than mysteriously disappearing. However, the dramatic accounts of the vanishing continued to fuel speculation. While evidence indicates that they fell in combat, the circumstances surrounding their fate remain clouded in mystery. Some conspiracy theorists actually believe that the First and Second World Wars were meticulously planned in order to destroy evidence of a supposed technologically advanced civilization called Tartaria. To that regard, maybe these men could have disappeared after learning too much about the Tartarian Empire. The Bennington Triangle is an eerie region in southwestern Vermont known for a string of unexplained disappearances between 1945 and 1950, occurred near Glastonbury Mountain, an area long associated with folklore and strange occurrences. The first disappearance was on November 12, 1945, when 74-year-old Mitty Rivers vanished while leading a hunting party. No trace of him was ever found. A year later, on December 1, 1946, 18-year-old Paula Weldon went for a hike on the Long Trail and mysteriously disappeared, sparking one of Vermont's largest ever coordinated search efforts, though despite extensive investigations, no clues ever emerged. In 1949, James Tetford, a veteran, inexplicably disappeared while riding a crowded bus. His belongings were left behind, but he was never seen again. The strangest case occurred on October 12, 1950, when 8-year-old Paul Jepson vanished near his family's farm. Despite searches with bloodhounds, no evidence was ever found. Later that same month, Frida Langer, 53, disappeared while hiking. Her body was discovered months later in an area previously searched, yet no cause of death could be determined. Theories range from kidnappings to paranormal phenomenon, as locals believe Glastonbury Mountain holds supernatural energy. Despite investigations, the disappearances remain unsolved, fueling legends about the mysterious Bennington Triangle. These cases could be some of the earliest recorded instances of missing 411 cases. The Dyatlov Pass incident is one of Russia's most perplexing mysteries. In 1959, a group of 9 experienced hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, set off on a trek through the Ural Mountains. Days later, their frozen bodies were discovered under bizarre circumstances near Dead Mountain. Their tent was found ripped from the inside, suggesting they had fled in a hurry. Some were found in little clothing, despite frigid temperatures. Several bodies showed signs of blunt force trauma, skull fractures, and broken ribs, yet none of the bodies showed any external wounds consistent with an attack. One hiker had missing eyes and another was without a tongue, further deepening the mystery. Investigators ruled out an avalanche due to undisturbed snow, and there were no signs of a struggle with an attacker. Radiation was detected on some clothing, fueling speculation about secret military experiments. Other theories include hypothermia-induced madness, infrasound waves causing panic, or even paranormal explanations such as UFOs or Yetis. Despite decades of investigations, no definitive answer has been found, and in 2019, Russian authorities revisited the case and suggested a rare type of avalanche is the cause. Though many remain unconvinced, the Dyatlov Pass incident continues to spark debate and is still talked about widely, with popular YouTubers such as Nick Crowley covering the topic. In July 1909, the SS Waratah, a passenger steamship, departed Durban, South Africa, bound for Cape Town with over 200 passengers and crew on board. The vessel had already shown signs of instability on previous voyages, but no immediate danger was reported when the ship left port. The Waratah was briefly sighted on July 27th by another ship, the SS Clan McIntyre, with no indication of distress. However, the ship never arrived at her destination. Despite extensive searches, no wreckage or survivors were ever found, and the ship seemed to have vanished off the face of the earth. Various theories attempt to explain her disappearance. Some suggest the ship capsized due to rough seas, possibly overwhelmed by strong currents or a sudden storm. Others believe structural flaws in her design caused her to sink unexpectedly. More speculative ideas involve rogue waves or even paranormal explanations. Over the years, multiple searches have been set out trying to locate the Waratah, but none have confirmed her final resting place. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 mysteriously disappeared on March 8, 2014, during a routine flight from Malaysia to Beijing, China. The Boeing 777 carried 239 passengers and crew when it lost contact with air traffic control less than an hour into its journey. Initially, the aircraft's last known location was over the South China Sea, but later investigations revealed it had diverted westward and continued flying for several hours. Despite extensive international search efforts, no wreckage was found for over a year. In 2015, debris believed to be from MH370 began washing up on islands and coastlines along the western Indian Ocean. These fragments had confirmed the plane's fate, but did not explain how or why it had gone so far off course. Theories about this plane's disappearance range from mechanical failure, hijacking, pilot suicide, or cyber interference. Some suspect deliberate maneuvers led to the crash, while others believe an emergency had rendered the crew unconscious or perhaps dead before the plane then drifted until fuel ran out. However, no conclusive evidence has ever surfaced to support any theory. MH370's disappearance remains one of aviation's greatest unsolved mysteries. Despite the largest and most expensive searches in history, its final resting place has never been located, leaving families of the victims without closure and fueling speculation about what truly happened to the ill-fated flight. The CAS-2 catamaran was discovered drifting off the coast of Queensland, Australia on April 18, 2007. Completely intact but eerily abandoned. On board were signs of a sudden departure, a laptop running, a meal set out, and personal belongings undisturbed. However, the three crew members, Derek Batten, as well as brothers Peter and James Tunstead, were nowhere to be found. Investigators found no signs of struggle, foul play, or distress. The boat's life raft was still on board, ruling out an emergency escape. The engine was running and the sails were intact, indicating the CAS-2 had not been in a severe storm. The vessel's last known movements suggested it had been sailing normally before being discovered. Several theories emerged, including accidental drowning, freak waves, or one crew member falling overboard and the others perishing while trying to help. However, without eyewitnesses or physical evidence, the exact events remain unknown. Authorities eventually concluded that the crew likely suffered an accidental tragedy at sea, possibly one falling over and the others attempting rescue. Yet the case remains open-ended as no bodies were ever recovered. The mystery of the CAS-2 continues to spark speculation, marking one of the most chilling modern disappearances at sea. If you liked this video, be sure to check out our others, and feel free to leave future video ideas down in the comment section below. If you haven't already, subscribe and hit the bell notification to get notified whenever we upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.